The city learned to lower its voice around Roman Blackwood. It wasn't written anywhere, not carved into stone or printed in newspapers, but everyone who mattered understood it instinctively. His name traveled faster than gunshots and quieter than threats. A single mention was enough to stall negotiations, reroute shipments, or make men rethink loyalties they'd sworn with blood. Roman Blackwood didn't need to shout. He ruled through silence, through the kind of reputation that made explanations unnecessary. His headquarters sat high above the city, occupying an entire private floor of a reinforced tower that looked ordinary from the outside and untouchable from within. Steel doors, biometric locks, corridors lined with men who never laned, never chatted, never blinked first. This wasn't an office. It was a command post. Decisions made here didn't just move money. They moved borders. They erased people. On that floor, assistants didn't resign. They vanished. No farewell emails, no exit interviews. One day a desk would be occupied, a coffee still warm beside a keyboard, and the next day it would be cleared, files reassigned, chair replaced, questions discouraged. The whispered rule moved through the lower ranks like a superstition carved into bone. No secretary lasts more than 30 days. Some said it was because Roman demanded perfection. Others said it was because he broke people without touching them. A few believed the job was cursed. The inner circle didn't bother learning their names anymore. To them, assistants were buffers, expendable layers placed between Roman and the chaos of the world, paperwork shields, voice filters. If someone cracked under pressure, better it be the person outside the door than the man behind it. They were hired, tested, and discarded with brutal efficiency. Roman never commented, never asked why another desk sat empty. He simply kept moving forward as if people were interchangeable parts in a machine that could not afford to slow. Behind closed doors, Roman Blackwood was exactly what the rumors promised and worse than anyone imagined. Tall, immaculately dressed, movements controlled down to the angle of his wrist when he adjusted his cuff. His eyes were a cold gray, unreadable, unforgiving. Men twice his size faltered under that gaze, not because he threatened them but because he didn't need to. His expectations were absolute, his patience non-existent. Mistakes weren't corrected gently. They were noted, remembered, and never forgiven. He didn't yell, he didn't curse, he didn't throw things. That was what terrified people the most. Roman believed weakness was contagious. He'd learned early that hesitation got people killed, that emotion blurred judgment, that attachment was a liability rivals loved to exploit, so he sealed himself off. No indulgences, no explanations, no mercy for incompetence. If someone couldn't keep up, they were removed from his path like debris after a storm. And yet, even among those who feared him, questions lingered. Why did every assistant fail when the pay was generous and the position powerful? Why did trained professionals, some with years in criminal operations, crumble in weeks? What exactly happened in that office that reduced confident men and women to shadows of themselves? No one knew, no one dared to find out. Roman arrived every morning at the same minute, left long after the city slept, and worked as if exhaustion were a myth invented by lesser men. He trusted no one fully, relied on nothing he hadn't verified himself, and kept his personal life locked away so tightly it might as well not exist. To his subordinates, he wasn't cruel for pleasure. He was cruel by necessity. A man who believed survival demanded constant vigilance, and that softness was a death sentence. Still, there were rumors even the inner circle didn't like repeating. Whispers that Roman never fired an assistant outright, that they left on their own, shaken by something they couldn't explain, that whatever happened behind those closed doors wasn't violence but something colder, something that made people feel small, replaceable, invisible. The floor remained spotless, the silence remained intact, the legend grew heavier with every empty desk. And somewhere beyond that tower, beyond the rules and the fear and the 30-day limit that no one had ever broken, fate was already moving, quietly, clumsily, stubbornly, toward a collision no one on that floor could have predicted. Because the man no one survived had never met someone who refused to disappear. Olivia Rose learned early that fear was quieter than people thought. It did not scream or run, it sat patiently in the chest and counted money that was not there, it measured rent against groceries, it watched the inbox refresh itself with polite rejections that all sounded the same. Thank you for your interest, thank you for your time, thank you, goodbye. At 26 she owned 3 things of value: a second-hand laptop, a stubborn hope she refused to bury, and a spine that had learned how to stay straight even when life lined hard against it. The coffee shop on 9th Street had become her unofficial office, a place where the wife was strong and the pity was weak. She sat there every morning with her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, listening to the city wake up and pretending she belonged to it. Her dream was not small. She wanted to write stories that mattered, stories that made people feel less alone. But dreams were terrible landlords and inspiration did not keep the heat on. Her landlord had reminded her of that twice this month. Kindly at first, less kindly the second time. Rachel slid into the chair across from her with the energy of someone who still believed things worked out. You look like you are planning a prison break, she said. Olivia smiled without humor and turned the laptop so her friend could see the screen. Rejection, rejection, rejection. Rachel winced, then leaned in. What about that listing everyone is afraid of, the private office position? Olivia felt the shift immediately, like someone had said a name that should not be spoken out loud. Roman Blackwood. The name sat heavy between them. It belonged to the part of the city people pretended not to see, whispered stories of men who disappeared and deals sealed in silence. Rachel spoke carefully. They say no one lasts a month with him. They say his assistants do not quit, they evaporate. Olivia laughed once, sharp and disbelieving, then stopped. Because fear did not change facts, and facts were that her savings were gone, her deadline was close, and survival was louder than rumor. That night her apartment felt smaller than usual. The pipes rattled like they were warning her. She opened the listing again and read it slowly. No name on the company, no salary range listed, only one sentence that made her pause: must be able to handle pressure without supervision. Something about it felt like a dare, something about it felt like truth. She did not tailor herself into something polite. She wrote honestly about deadlines, about chaos, about learning fast and not breaking easily. She did not promise perfection, she promised endurance. She hit send and immediately felt sick. The call came 3 days later, just after sunrise, a calm voice, a private number, an interview scheduled for that afternoon. Olivia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall long after the line went dead. Fear finally spoke clearly. This was not a job, this was a threshold. People did not walk into Roman Blackwood's world and walk back out unchanged. She understood that. What she did not understand yet was why her hands were steady as she stood up. Maybe it was because she had already lost everything that mattered, or maybe it was because somewhere deep inside she believed that disappearing quietly was worse than facing something dangerous head-on. Whatever the reason, Olivia Rose did not back out. She did not call to cancel. She dressed, she breathed, and she stepped toward the man no one survived, unaware that the collision waiting for her would change the rules forever. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have, not because of distance but because every floor passed like a warning. Olivia stood stiffly with her coffee balanced in both hands as if it were a fragile truce. The walls were polished steel and her reflection stared back at her, too honest to ignore. She told herself to breathe, but her lungs refused to cooperate. This was not a building that welcomed people, it tolerated them, and only briefly. When the doors opened, the hallway beyond was silent in a way that did not belong to offices. No phones rang, no voices drifted. Men stood along the walls dressed in dark suits with eyes that noticed everything and revealed nothing. Olivia stepped forward too quickly, trying to escape the weight of their attention. Her heel caught the edge of the marble floor and momentum made the decision for her. The coffee left her hands before she could gasp. It splashed across a black suit so perfectly cut it looked unreal. Steam rose between them as time slowed to a cruel crawl. Olivia froze, staring at the spreading stain like it was a death sentence written in liquid. The men along the walls shifted subtly, and she understood in her bones that this was not an accident. People survived. She lifted her head and met his eyes. Roman Blackwood stood before her like the embodiment of consequence, tall, calm, immovable. His gaze was not angry yet, and that was worse. It was assessing, calculating, as if he were deciding whether she existed long enough to be corrected. The silence stretched until it hurt. She spoke before fear could shut her mouth. She apologized clumsily, honestly, words tumbling over each other. She reached for tissues she knew would be useless. Her hands shook, but she did not step back. Something in her refused to retreat even as instinct screamed. Roman glanced down at his ruined suit, then back at her. The men waited for an order that did not come. Instead, he spoke quietly, asking if she was here for the position. His voice carried no threat and no mercy, only certainty. She nodded because lying felt impossible. Her name left her mouth without permission. "Follow me," he said. The office beyond the doors was not extravagant. It was intentional, every surface chosen for control, not comfort. Olivia stood where she was, told, her heart hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it. He did not raise his voice. He did not mention the coffee again. He asked one question that sliced through her rehearsed answers. "Why should I keep you alive in my space?" The words were calm and devastating. Olivia swallowed hard and felt something settle inside her. Fear, yes, but also clarity. She answered without polishing herself. She said she was not perfect and never would be. She said she learned fast and did not run when things became uncomfortable. She said she needed the job more than she feared the man asking the question. Roman studied her like a puzzle he did not expect to enjoy. People usually begged or trembled or lied. She did none of those things. She stood there stained with coffee and stubborn honesty, and met his gaze without flinching. He circled the desk once slowly, explaining the rules without explanation. Long hours, no mistakes, no excuses. Assistants before her had claimed they understood. None of them did. He stopped in front of her and waited. Olivia lifted her chin and said then maybe they were asked the wrong questions. Something shifted. It was not warmth or approval. It was interest, sharp and dangerous. Roman Blackwood nodded once and told her to start Monday. The men along the walls did not move, but the air changed. Olivia walked out on unsteady legs, unaware that she had just crossed a line no one else had dared to step over. And somewhere behind those closed doors, a man who never hesitated began to wonder what exactly he had invited into his world. The first day did not ease her in. It dropped her straight into the deep end and watched to see if she sank. Olivia arrived before sunrise because instinct told her lateness here was not forgiven. The private floor was already awake when she stepped out of the elevator. Men nodded without warmth and doors opened without sound. Her desk waited outside Roman Blackwood's office like a thin line between survival and disappearance. The work hit immediately and without mercy. Files that did not match, numbers that hid lies, messages written in code and half-truths, names that meant nothing to her yet carried weight that made her stomach tighten. This was not clerical work. This was damage control for an empire built on silence. She learned quickly that every paper she touched had consequences far beyond the page. One mistake here could start a war somewhere else. Roman did not explain, he did not train, he did not check on her. He simply placed tasks in front of her and expected results. His presence filled the space even when he was not there, a pressure that made breathing feel deliberate. Olivia spilled things constantly those first days, a pen knocked over, a stack of files slipping from her arms, once even tripping over nothing at all. The men watching her from the corners of the room exchanged looks that said this one would not last the week. But every time she dropped something, she picked it up. Every time she made a physical mess, she cleaned it without apology and returned to the work sharper than before. She noticed patterns others missed, saw connections hidden between lines meant to confuse. She asked questions only when necessary and never to protect her ego. Roman watched from behind glass and said nothing. By the second week the clock had started. 30 days was not a rumor here, it was an expectation. Olivia felt it in the way conversations stopped when she walked by, in the way chairs were never personalized, in the way her name was still rarely used. She was temporary until proven otherwise, a ghost in progress. The nights grew longer, the building emptier, danger quieter but heavier. Once she overheard a conversation she was not meant to hear, a a threat moving closer than planned, she did not panic. She worked through it and reorganized schedules just enough to give Roman an advantage he did not ask for. When he realized what she had done, his eyes met hers for a brief moment that held surprise and calculation. On day 21, she made her first real mistake, a delivery delayed because she trusted the wrong courier. Tension cracked the room like a whip. Men waited for Roman to explode, to end her quietly and efficiently. Instead, he dismissed everyone else and faced her alone. The silence was unbearable. Olivia admitted fault without excuses, offered solutions instead of apologies. Roman stared at her for a long time, then turned back to his desk. "Fix it," he said. No punishment, no raised voice. It was worse than anger and better than mercy. She fixed it. She did not sleep, she did not eat, she fixed it. By the end of the 4th week, the whispered rule felt fragile for the first time in years. Olivia was still there, still standing, still stubbornly present, and Roman Blackwood had not looked at her like a disposable buffer in days. He looked at her like a variable he had not accounted for. And that unsettled him more than any threat ever had. Something changed without announcement, and everyone felt it. The private floor still breathed the same controlled silence, but it no longer felt hollow. It felt alert, like a predator that had sensed another presence and had not yet decided whether to strike or observe. Olivia noticed it first in Roman Blackwood himself, in the way his footsteps slowed when he passed her desk, in the way his gaze lingered half a second longer than necessary before moving on. Roman had built his life on separation. Distance was his shield and discipline his only intimacy. Yet now there were moments when his attention returned to her without intention, moments when he caught himself listening for the rhythm of her typing or the faint clatter that followed her movements through the floor. She was clumsy in a way that should have irritated him. Chairs bumped and files slipped, and once she nearly collided with a guard twice her size. But she never apologized for existing, and that unsettled him. Olivia learned his patterns faster than anyone before her, not because she tried to please him but because she watched. She learned the signs that came before violence, the slight tightening of his jaw when a lie reached him, the pause before a decision that meant someone else would pay, and quietly she began to intervene. A delayed call here, a rearranged meeting there, information placed on his desk at precisely the moment it could change an outcome. The first time she prevented bloodshed without ever mentioning it, Roman noticed. He read the report, then looked up slowly as if the room itself had surprised him. "You anticipated this?" he asked. Olivia nodded simply and said it was obvious if you looked early enough. Something in his expression shifted then, not approval but respect edged with caution, like a man realizing his weapon had learned to think. Late nights became routine. The city darkened outside the windows while the private floor stayed awake. Olivia stayed without being asked, and Roman stopped telling her to leave. Once she placed food on his desk and said nothing. Another time she pushed a glass of water closer when his hands began to shake from exhaustion. He bristled at first, then allowed it, not because he needed it, but because refusing took more effort than accepting. The inner circle noticed, and they did not like it. Whispers followed Olivia in the halls, now sharper than before. She was not just surviving, she was altering the balance. Men who had watched others vanish began to wonder what made her different. Roman heard those whispers and did nothing to stop them, a silent warning in itself. One night near midnight, Roman spoke without looking up. "Why are you still here?" Olivia answered truthfully, "Because the work is not done." He waited for more. She added, "And because leaving before it is finished feels like quitting." Roman froze just long enough for the words to settle. Quitting was the one thing he despised more than failure. From that night on, something unspoken existed between them, not kindness and not softness but awareness. Roman began choosing restraint where he once chose punishment, not for mercy but for precision. Olivia saw it and understood the cost of that choice. He was bending a rule he had lived by for years. Power had not left him. It had narrowed and sharpened, focused through control rather than force, and Olivia stood closer to the center of it than anyone ever had, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it one quiet decision at a time. By the end of the 5th week, the rule of 30 days was broken, and no one dared say it aloud. Roman Blackwood had not only allowed someone to remain, he had begun to change the way he ruled, and neither of them yet understood how dangerous that made them both. The night the mask slip did not announce itself with drama. It arrived quietly like everything dangerous does. The private floor was nearly empty and the city below glowed in distant fragments of light. Olivia noticed the stillness, first the kind that pressed against the skin. Roman Blackwood had not left his office for hours and the light beneath his door had not dimmed. She hesitated only a moment before knocking because something in her chest told her this was a night that mattered. He looked different when she stepped inside, not weaker but less controlled. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, and the sharp precision that defined him seemed dulled by exhaustion. Papers lay scattered across the desk, not chaotic but abandoned. When he looked at her, his gaze held no command, only something raw and searching. "What do you want?" he asked, but the words lacked their usual edge. "You have not eaten," she said simply, and placed a cup of coffee where his hand could reach it. He did not push it away this time. He stared at it as if unsure what accepting it meant. Then he took a slow sip and something in his shoulders loosened almost imperceptibly. "Why do you keep doing that?" he asked quietly. Olivia did not pretend to misunderstand. "Because someone should," she replied. The silence that followed was heavier than any threat he had ever made. Roman turned toward the window, and for the first time since she had met him, his reflection looked older than his years. The city did not bow to him from this angle, it ignored him completely. He spoke without turning back. "My father built this world," he said, "not with kindness, not with love, only with fear and discipline. He taught me that caring was a weakness rivals could smell. He taught me that hesitation killed men faster than bullets. When my mother died, there was no room for grief, only work, only survival." Olivia listened without interrupting, her heart pounding, because this was not information he shared, this was confession. "I learned to seal everything away," he continued, "emotion, anger, mercy, hope. It made me effective, it made me untouchable." His voice tightened, "but it also made me alone." The word lingered between them, fragile and exposed. Olivia stood slowly and moved closer, not touching him yet, but near enough that he could feel her presence. "Strength does not have to mean isolation," she said. "Control does not have to mean silence." He turned then and the mask finally fell. His eyes were not cold, they were tired and full of something dangerously human. "You do not understand what it costs to let someone close," he said. Olivia met his gaze unflinching. "I understand exactly what it costs," she replied. "I just believe it costs more not to." For a moment Roman Blackwood looked like a man standing at the edge of something irreversible. The empire, the fear, the rules he lived by all pressed in around him. And in front of him stood a woman who did not fear the monster because she saw the man. He did not reach for her, yet he did not step back either. That night nothing was decided and everything changed. When Olivia left his office, she felt the shift ripple through the floor, and Roman remained by the window long after she was gone, aware that the most dangerous thing he had ever done was not show weakness but allow someone to see it. Danger did not announce itself with raised voices or gunfire. It arrived wrapped in routine, folded neatly into schedules and shipments and meetings that looked ordinary on paper. Olivia felt it first in the way men stopped meeting her eyes, in the way conversations shifted when she entered a room. The private floor no longer felt merely watchful, it felt coiled, like something had drawn a line and was waiting for permission to cross it. Roman Blackwood sensed it too. He did not ask questions because questions implied uncertainty. Instead, he watched patterns and listened to silences. A trusted route arrived minutes late. A message carried a hesitation that did not belong. A name surfaced twice in a single day when it should have stayed buried. Someone inside the walls was moving pieces without his consent, and that meant betrayal was already breathing in his house. The inner circle gathered behind closed doors with faces set and voices low. One of the capos believed Roman had softened, believed the presence of a woman at his side meant distraction, vulnerability, leverage. Olivia was not named outright, but her shadow stretched across the table. Roman listened without expression while calculations formed behind his eyes. Betrayal he could handle, but betrayal that reached for her changed the rules. Olivia became aware she was being watched, not openly but deliberately. A car that slowed too long at corners, footsteps that echoed where none should have been. She did not panic. Panic wasted time. She adjusted her movements and reported nothing directly. Instead, she altered route schedules, access points. Quiet countermeasures learned through observation, not instruction. Roman noticed the changes and understood what she was doing without a word exchanged. The first direct threat came disguised as courtesy, a message delivered through channels that should have been secure, a suggestion that accidents happen to people who stood too close to power. Olivia read it once, then burned it. When Roman saw the ashes, he did not ask what had been written. His jaw tightened and something old and lethal stirred behind his restraint. That night the private floor locked down silently, men repositioned and doors sealed. Roman stood in his office with the lights dimmed and the city distant beyond the glass. Olivia entered without being summoned because instinct told her absence would be worse than presence. He turned toward her with eyes sharp and furious and afraid. "Leave the city," he said. "Now, money, safety, anonymity." He meant it as protection, not command. Olivia refused without raising her voice. She said running would confirm weakness, that disappearing would hand victory to someone who misunderstood both of them. Roman stared at her like she had just stepped into a storm unarmed. "This is not your war," he said. She answered calmly that it became her war the moment someone tried to use her as a message. The betrayal surfaced fully before dawn. A capo moved too soon, convinced Roman would respond with blood and chaos. Instead, Roman chose precision. The traitor was exposed, stripped of allies, and removed without spectacle. No citywide violence, no warning shots, just absence. The message was clear and terrifying in its restraint. When it was over, Roman found Olivia waiting exactly where she said she would be, alive, unbroken, unwavering. Something in his chest shifted painfully. Fear rose, not of losing control, but of losing her. The realization struck harder than any attack ever had. That night he admitted the truth he had avoided, that the danger was no longer abstract, that caring for her had become his greatest risk and his greatest strength. Olivia did not promise safety, she promised presence, and for the first time Roman Blackwood understood that loyalty chosen freely was more powerful than fear enforced. The war inside the walls ended quietly, but the line had been crossed, and nothing between them could return to what it had been before. The city they traveled to was not chosen for comfort or distance, it was chosen because everything dangerous converged there. A border of influence where loyalties were thin and mistakes were remembered forever. The plane cut through night clouds and Olivia sat beside Roman Blackwood, close enough to feel the tension rolling off him in controlled waves. They did not speak much because too many eyes watched and too many ears listened, but awareness passed between them like electricity neither could ignore. The hotel rose from the street like a fortress dressed in glass and light. Security cleared floors without drawing attention, and keys were handed over without names spoken aloud. The suites were adjacent, connected by a door no one acknowledged, yet both noticed instantly. Olivia unpacked slowly, listening to the quiet hum of danger beneath the luxury. This trip was not about contracts or territory alone, it was about proof. Proof that Roman had not weakened and proof that Olivia was not leverage. The meeting that night unfolded in a private dining room heavy with tension and unspoken history. Men across the table smiled too easily and watched too closely. Olivia stood at Roman's shoulder, steady and alert, translating numbers and intentions before words fully formed. She noticed the subtle shifts, a glance held too long, a pause that meant resistance disguised as agreement. Quietly she placed information where it would redirect conversation without exposing strategy. Roman caught each move and adjusted seamlessly. By the time the deal closed, the room felt colder. Respect had been earned not through intimidation but precision. As they left, one man spoke just loudly enough to be heard, saying that Roman Blackwood had changed. Roman did not turn back, but Olivia felt his hand brush hers, a silent acknowledgement that change was not weakness. Back at the hotel, the elevator ride stretched unbearably slow. When the doors opened, neither moved immediately. The corridor was empty and the night pressed in close. Roman spoke first, his voice low and stripped of command. "This is where you leave," he said. "Safety waits on the other side of that door. I can make sure you never have to look over your shoulder again." Olivia stepped closer instead of away. "You are offering escape because you are afraid," she said, "not of enemies but of wanting something you cannot control." Roman closed his eyes briefly as if bracing for impact. "Wanting you is the risk," he admitted. "I do not know how to protect you without destroying everything else." "You do not own me," she said gently, "and I am not asking you to become someone else. I am asking you to choose me knowing the cost." Silence fell heavy and final. The door between their rooms seemed to hum with possibility. Roman opened his eyes and saw certainty where fear should have lived. He moved first, not with force, but with restraint, every step deliberate, every touch paused long enough to ask permission without words. Olivia answered by staying, by lifting her hand to his chest, feeling the steadiness beneath the danger. This was not surrender, it was decision. When they kissed, it was not hunger alone, it was weeks of held breath finally released. Inside his suite, the city glittered far below, unaware that something irreversible was happening above it. Roman confessed the truth he had never spoken aloud, that control had been his shield and solitude his prison. Olivia answered with honesty of her own that she chose him not for safety but for depth, for the man who learned restraint not because he had to, but because he wanted to. They did not pretend the morning would be simple, they did not promise secrecy or escape. What they chose instead was clarity. Whatever came next would be faced together without denial, without fear masquerading as discipline. As dawn crept through the windows, Roman held her and understood that the most dangerous choice he had ever made was also the most honest. And for the first time in his life, he did not regret choosing with his heart. The truth did not arrive gently, it struck like a door flung open in a locked room. Roman Blackwood learned it the morning after the deal, when an old name surfaced from a file that should not have existed. A relic from years ago tied to a night soaked in blood and survival. He stared at the document as if it might disappear if he blinked. The name matched Olivia's father, and the realization sent a cold wave through his chest. Memory surged uninvited. A younger Roman cornered in a warehouse surrounded by men who had already decided he would not leave alive. Chaos everywhere, gunfire echoing too close, and then a stranger stepping between him and death, not for money, not for loyalty, but because it was the right thing to do. A man who took a bullet meant for Roman and vanished into the night without asking for a name or favor. Roman had searched for him afterward and found nothing, assumed he had died, buried the debt beneath years of violence and rule. Now the truth sat in his hands, undeniable and dangerous. The woman he loved was not an accident in his life. She was a consequence long delayed. Olivia sensed the shift immediately when she entered his office and saw the color drained from his face. He said her father's name quietly and watched the breath leave her body. She had grown up with fragments of that story. A man injured, a past never explained, a silence that followed him until his death. She had never known where it connected, only that it shaped everything she became. The air between them tightened as understanding formed. Roman did not reach for her, and that restraint hurt more than distance. He said he had been saved once by a man he could never repay, and now the universe had returned the debt with cruel precision. Olivia listened, stunned, not afraid, but shaken by the weight of fate pressing in from all sides. Before either could speak again, the inner circle moved. Whispers traveled faster than truth, and the revelation reached ears that would use it as fuel. A gathering was called, not formally, but inevitably, capos filling the room, eyes sharp with curiosity and challenge. The woman beside Roman was no longer just an assistant or a partner, she was a symbol tied to blood and history. Roman stood before them without raising his voice. He did not deny the connection, he claimed it. He spoke of the man who saved him and the woman who now stood beside him by choice, not obligation. He made it clear that Olivia was not leverage, not protection, not debt. She was his decision. Silence followed, heavy and testing. Then one voice broke it, accusing fate of weakness and sentiment. Roman responded with calm finality. Anyone who believed loyalty was bought misunderstood power. The room shifted, alliances realigned not through fear but clarity. Later, alone again, Olivia asked the question she had avoided. Did this change everything? Roman answered honestly, yes, it explains everything, but it does not erase choice. I did not love you because of him, and I will not lose you because of him. The truth settled between them not as a chain but as a foundation. What had begun as chance revealed itself as design, and the shock of it left them both altered forever. The council gathered without ceremony, yet every man present understood the weight of the moment. The room was carved from stone in silence and loyalty bought with years of survival. Roman Blackwood stood at the head not as a tyrant demanding obedience but as a leader who had already decided his future. Olivia stood beside him, not behind, not hidden, not borrowed power, but chosen presence. The room felt the shift before anyone spoke. This was where fear usually ruled, where voices softened and eyes lowered, yet Roman did not lean into that familiar darkness. He spoke calmly, telling them the truth without embellishment, that the woman beside him was no longer an assistant or a shield or a rumor. She was his partner in every sense that mattered. Some men stiffened, others studied her closely, weighing what this meant for balance and control. Olivia did not flinch under their scrutiny. She had learned that power did not always roar, sometimes it stood quietly and waited. Roman continued, explaining that loyalty built on terror cracked under pressure, but loyalty built on trust endured. The syndicate would not weaken, it would sharpen, discipline would remain, but bloodshed would no longer be the first language spoken. A few men shifted, uncomfortable with change, but none challenged him. Then Roman did something no one in that room had ever witnessed. He stepped forward and lowered himself to one knee. The movement rippled through the council like shock through water. This was not submission, this was declaration. He took Olivia's hand, steady and deliberate, and asked her to stand with him, not as obligation, not as fate, but as choice renewed every day. Her answer was immediate and unwavering. "Oh, yes." The word carried through the room louder than gunfire ever had. Alliances sealed not through fear but inevitability. The men understood something irreversible had occurred. Roman Blackwood had not lost power, he had transformed it. What followed was not applause but acceptance, the kind that mattered in their world. Later, away from eyes and expectations, they stood by the window overlooking the city that had once bowed in silence. Olivia leaned into him, and for the first time Roman felt peace without vigilance. He admitted softly that he had believed love was a liability until it became his foundation. Olivia smiled, telling him that survival without meaning was not victory. The woman who had been expected to vanish after 30 days now stood as legacy, not because she endured him but because she changed him. Roman Blackwood, who ruled through silence, now ruled through intention. The city would continue to fear his name, but those closest would understand the difference. Their story did not end with safety or softness, it continued with danger chosen wisely and love carried openly. What began with a collision no one expected became a future no one could challenge, and in a world where people disappeared quietly, a woman arrived clumsily and stayed forever.